Hey everyone, and welcome back to the brand new episode of Four Friends in a Book podcast. I'm Chris Colson. I'm joined here with my friends Isaiah Tukes, Kimberly Lake, and Laria Reed. And again, we are Four Friends in a Book. So if you're new to the channel, Four Friends in a Book is our monthly podcast series where we have a discussion centered around a book we're reading together. We meet here to talk about that book and kind of review it. So somewhat of a book club, book review mixed with table talk amongst friends. And of course, we hit you guys with these rants at the end. So again, if you're new to the channel, go back, check us out, become familiar. For those that have been rocking with us from day one, we thank you guys. We appreciate you for supporting us. And just continue to rock along with us. So always, we're always looking for new book recommendations, new topics you want to hear from us. So hit us up, slide in our DMs, leave us a comment. Look, send us an email, whatever you want to do. We want to hear from you guys here on Four Friends in a Book podcast. All right. So Four Friends in a Book, we read books over here. The book for this month, big book, somewhat controversial. I mean, especially in this era we're in right now with banning books. You know, we've talked about it before about critical race theory and just the education system and wanting to take certain books out of our curriculum. So started out being an issue or an edition within the New York Times magazine, and now it's a Hulu series, and just really became its own, snowballed into this big mass of a production that we have now, which we are calling, which we're referring to, or which is called, entitled, The 1619 Project, led by Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones. So the new origin story, really highlighting the arrival of the first African enslaved people here in the Virginia colonies in the year 1619. It's just really telling the origin of this country, of the United States, some of the history, some of the things that you may not be as familiar with, and just kind of give you a real background as far as things that have kind of set the foundation and the tone of even what we see in today's time. So look, y'all know your boy love history. This is right up my alley. I was all into this book. Again, it's a huge book, a lot of information. So we go try to unpack it here today. I don't even know if we can do justice to this book. There's so much information. But let's get into it. Let's start the discussion. Let's talk about the 1619 Project by Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones. So first question, y'all already know what it is. We always kick it off like this. If you had to rate the book on a scale of 1 to 10, what would that be? And who want to kick this one off? I'm going to come to Miss Kimberly Lake to start us off on the 1619 Project.
Well, I enjoyed the book. When I was in school, my favorite subject was history. So this honestly didn't feel like a book. It felt more like a textbook. And I can see why when they were talking about in the book, some places use it as a curriculum because it really is like a textbook. It's a lot of information, but it goes from 1619 all the way up to present day, like when the book came out. So it's very relevant to today, as well as learning how things from like now tie into our past and all of that. So I thought the book really, really was great. It's a long listen on Audible as well. But I think if you just take the time to listen to it, you don't have to listen to it all at once, but just taking it in chunks and really listening to it and just maybe researching what you're hearing about. I think it's a really great book that everybody should read, not just Black Americans, but all Americans, because it is American history. So honestly, I would give it a 9. I thought it was I thought it was really great. It had a lot of information, a lot of stuff I knew because I did a film called Segregated Sundays. Check it out on YouTube. So I knew some of the information from that, and from some of the books that we've already covered in Four Friends in a Book. So some of the information was familiar, but I think I still picked up a lot, and I think it's a good read for anybody that wants to know the history of America, and so I give it a 9.
All right, coming to my good brother Isaiah Tukes, man. Like he already hype over here. 1619 Project, man. What did you think about it? And if you had to rate it, what would that be?
Well, for me, I think Nikole Hannah-Jones, she just tells this story of how slavery and its legacy has shaped and impacted America. I think this book everyone should actually read this book. Just read it because a lot of people don't want you to read it. And the fact that they don't want you to read it should tell you something is very powerful in this book. And it is. This collection of articles is simply amazing. And no matter what someone might be going through, the conclusions are all the ways to saying no one can deny the facts that are actually in this book. And whether you even think that America is still the same nation today as it was in 1619, it can't actually be denied the importance and the power of actually learning the stories of these enslaved people and the victims of these horrible racist violence that has actually came throughout the history of America. And too often we only listen to part of the story, and which are the people that are actually still living. But what I like about this book is they tell the story of the people that actually have passed away and put it in these present day times. And what I most like about this book is that the 1619 Project actually at least reframes the conversation around the source and the outcomes of that violence. And for me, I like to read. I tell anyone read it, even though it's hard. Read it precisely because it's hard. But for nothing else, everyone should actually read this book. And I rated a 9.9.
Okay,
Okay.
9.9. Look, almost a 10. Look, all right. Good summation, brother. All right. So Miss Laria Reed, what did you think about this book by Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones, The 1619 Project?
It was very informative. That's the word that keeps coming to my mind. When I was listening, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so much stuff that I knew and then so much stuff that I did not know. And it was like Kim said, it's like a textbook in a sense.
Hmm.
And for me, with my personality, I'm very happy go lucky and all that. But it was very sad, a lot of the things that they talked about, because I was just thinking, like, oh my God, like this has been a struggle for a while. Like, and it was all facts. So you can't dispute facts. It's like, this is what happened and this is what's going on now. And so that's what I really liked about it. It wasn't an opinion of somebody's, it was like, this is what it is. And I
Hmm.
think that everybody needs to read the book. And I know I've said that before. I was listening to this book or reading the book that we're reading, and I'm like, oh my God, it was just so heavy. But yet, I mean, that's the Black experience. It's heavy
Hmm.
for us. So I rate it because of the heaviness of it. I'll give it, and it's, look, facts are facts. Great book. It was just a lot for me to take on at one time. So I will give it an 8. An 8 is what I'll give it. But the facts are great. It's informative, but it's just a lot. It was just a lot for me to take in. But I mean, hey, that's what it is.
Okay.
So you needed a good nap after this book, huh?
Yeah,
It was that.
I was like, good God, okay, because it wasn't letting up. It was like we were going from subject to subject. Like, okay, let's talk about music. Okay, let's talk about the church. Okay, let's talk. I mean, it was like, good Lord, can I get a break? I mean, we went all the way through. So
Ah.
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. I think you guys all bring up some good points. Yeah, it's so much information.
Hmm.
And even to Laria's point, um, and we often say it, and I just think that kind of is a testament to the books we pick here on Four Friends in the Book. Like, we picking good books up here. So look, if y'all didn't read with us, yeah, sadly mistaken. Y'all need to pick up these books and check them out because
Hmm.
yeah, our book selection pretty fire. So y'all should join
yeah,
in. But
Right.
oh man, just so much information, such a wealth of information. And even like Kim said, I mean, from 1619 to present day, like it covers everything. Um, and just to see the evolution of this book, I mean, again, I kind of mentioned earlier. So starting off as just an issue within the New York Times magazine in 2019, that snowballed and morphed into, having different audio series and kind of a expanded edition of this book into it actually became a book. And now even this year in 2023 to show up on the big screen, kind of be an adaptation of the book now in this series that is being portrayed on Hulu. So um, great book. Your boy love history. it was just so much. I don't know how we can do this book justice with just so much information to unpack. Um, but I was all in it. As mentioned, it's a thick read or a long listen. So prepare yourself. Uh, take it in small doses if you need to. But I think it is relevant to all Americans. So again, this is some emphasis on a lot of the Black experience and Black American history, but that is American history as well. And
That's
so
true.
I
That's true.
think we all need to partake in this. And as Isaiah mentioned, I mean, the fact that they're trying to ban some of this literature is a telling sign as well that, hey, this is probably something you need to kind of look into, check out, because, for the longest, they didn't want us reading. So now that we have information now,
Mm-hmm.
is this movement to try to destroy history and cover up things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
great selection. So if I had to rate it, yeah, I don't like doing these half scale stuff. So I'm gonna give it a 9 as well. I think it was a great book. Um, a lot of information. You do have to kind of prepare yourself for it.
You
So,
do.
but it's so good, and I learned so much. I mean, so if you really
Mm-hmm.
have a thirst for knowledge of about trying to understand the history of this country and really getting a kind of a different perspective. I mean, again, Nikole Hannah-Jones had a lot of backlash behind this book. There was some
Mm-hmm.
controversy, some people questioning some of the historical context that she presented, and even some of the political aspect. I mean, you start hearing politicians talking about trying to remove things and this different legislation. Again, we talked about it in previous episodes. Critical race theory and all these things. But I just feel like it was a good combination of uh, the warmth of the suns that we read earlier, or even how the word is passed. So just kind of a continuation of things we've already kind of discussed, kind of studied here. Even plugging Kim's documentary, Segregated Sundays. Like there's a lot of information and context that was even brought up in this book that kind of expanded on her documentary. So
Mm-hmm.
good selection. If you guys haven't checked it out, definitely pick it up. So we got two nines, a 9.9, and a 8,
And an 8.
Maria. Okay.
You don't want me to change my number? You're the only one with an 8.
No, it's good. I understand. Like I said, there's a lot of information, and so for those, you gotta have to prepare yourself for it. I mean, it's a lot to unpack, but like I say, it is good.
Mm-hmm.
We'll listen in written format, or if you're listening on Audible. So if you're struggling reading, we still, we don't get no sponsorship from Audible, but hey, we plug them often. If you have hard time or difficult time reading books, listening is a convenient way of getting that same information. So that's always an
Mm-hmm.
option for you. All right, so we kind of talked about it. You guys have kind of alluded to it. A lot of information. Um, 18 chapters in this book to be exact, mixed with poems and other kind of short stories that are just kind of really brought out within this book. And so we have topics of democracy, race, fear, sugar, capitalism, the church, as Kim kind of talked about, self-defense, punishment, music, healthcare, progress, justice, just to name a few. So a lot of chapters, a lot of different topics. And again, dating all the way back to 1619 up into
Mm-hmm.
present day. I mean, we're talking about George Floyd, some of the still civil injustices that we've seen within this country. Like all those topics are still being covered within this book. Even on the Hulu series, if you guys, it's kind of a shortened version of it, but it touches on a lot of good stuff as well. But
Mm-hmm.
was there a particular chapter or a topic within this book that really resonated with you guys that you found very interesting, or appealing to you, or even just something news you weren't aware of prior to reading this book that really stood out to you? And I'm gonna come to my brother Isaiah. Man, did you have a chapter or a particular part of this book that really stood out for you?
For me, what stood out is chapter 11. I think The name of that title is Inheritance, and it's focused on this family, the Bowlings, and this is like a young black couple living in Alabama. I think the husband name was Elmore. He was like a businessman, and actually came from like a long line of black entrepreneurship. Even at the height of his success, he was a guy who employed, I think, up to like 40 black employees that came under him. He ran a fleet of trucks, a gas station, a general store. I think it was like a delivery company, a catering services, and was even a sharecropper. And like his father and his grandfather, whose livestock had been taken by white men that lived there. Bowling learned that he had to sidestep in his restrictions and even the roadblocks that even came for him. And he even prospered in the environment explicitly designed to actually shut him out. And, I think it was in 1947, I mistakenly, that, he was actually shot on his route as he was delivering some services by some angry white people that was actually, shot him just because of greed and jealousy. And no more had, even stepped over this invisible line, as they say in the book, at the point that a black person's success is actually being seen by a threat to racial hierarchy. And without him to actually run that operation, the family, prosperous, actually, the prosper that they actually had actually came to a halt with financial difficulties. And this is just one of the examples of systemic that goes on with black wealth in this America. I know today's time we talk about reparations that were repeatedly promised but rarely fulfilled, and the wealth was forcibly seized and destroyed by violent displays. And this actually struck for me because I remember at growing up, and my granddad actually shared with me about, when he first started out and moved, out into his own, he actually rented this house. And, he wanted better for his family. So he just started up with savings and, good business investments. And he was able to first acquire land, and he had to actually secretly, build his house without anyone knowing it. And it was like at the very end that, when he was about to move, that he had to let the homeowner know that he was staying in his house, that he was leaving. And the homeowner actually got mad because he was leaving. And he told me because the reason that you had to do it that way, because, back in those days, white people actually destroyed the possessions of black ownership if they saw that you was prospering and doing things in life. And I know even you, Laria, you shared in a past podcast that your grandfather was actually an entrepreneur, and that struck home for me because this easily could have been my family in this book, because they wanted to destroy things that my grandfather, started, and these businesses that he wanted to flourish. So, and we see this pattern over and over again, even in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They destroyed this whole Black Wall Street, one of the history's most prosperous black neighborhoods that you can find. This 1921 massacre where white attackers murdered and about approximately like 300 black people. And in that same year of 1921, a Georgia farmer who was illegally enslaving people in 1921 murdered the black men on these farms because he didn't want to get caught enslaving enslaving these black men. And these instances are just examples of constant and ongoing attempt to sabotage black wealth in America. And today's black Americans continue to feel these ramifications in their businesses and opportunities to prosper.
Mhm.
That's good,
Wow.
man. That was
Mhm.
deep. I
I'm
think you
sorry I
bring up a
went too
good.
deep.
I don't want to. I don't want to go now. I don't want to go. That was
That's good.
good.
That's good. And I think you
Hmm.
bring up a good point, man, because we often talk about like generational wealth, but to see the flip side of that, like generational poverty. So
Hmm.
to see a family, and I actually took note of that. That was one of my a good story in that chapter that I kind of resonated with as well, because again, you had a family that was very um, had had kind of gained prosperity,
That's true. That's
turned a
true.
difficult situation into something positive. Starting a trucking company. I think he ended up owning a gas like
Hmm.
a gas station as well. And then to have that ripped from his hands and be murdered in front of his children, but to also see the domino effect or the impact that they had on his children. Now them not being able to kind of continue in that legacy of entrepreneurship and carry on what their father had built for them. Like now they're having to find different outlets to figure out, how to navigate life. And
Hmm.
even in the book, it kind of talks about that, how his kids had a hard time
Wow.
thereafter. So it shows how, we often talk about how generational wealth can change things, but also looking at how generational poverty could put you in a bad space as well. So yeah, that was good, man. I really enjoyed that story that was brought out in this book as well. So all right, Loretta, like I try to give you a little buffer, but I'm still coming to you next.
I'm like, man, look, my stuff, I'm not going to be nearly as deep as Isaiah, I promise. I just can't. He went all the way in and through. But anyway, so the things that, well, it was a lot of things because as we've been talking, it's a lot of information. But it was two things that stuck out to me. The biggest, of course, you all know I went to the Black church section probably after like chapter 2 because I was like, I want to know what they're talking about. But within that, it just came to me because I know we talked about even from going back to Kim's Segregated Sundays, her documentary. Go look it up on YouTube.
Oh, YouTube.
But even with that, a lot of people say, you know, they're like, it's the most segregated time is Sunday morning and all. But when you go to the history of it and understand how Black people wanted to be in worship with white people, but were turned away, it created a segregation. You know, it wasn't like we just wanted to do it that way. It created that. So you create your own style, you create your own everything through that. And I'm glad that they touched on that because a lot of times we say, oh, we need to start doing it this way. But the history, if you go back to it, it's not because we want to do it that way. It's because, in a sense, we were forced. Same way with music. We wanted to have our own music and our own culture, but, you know, the whole thing of making sure that other cultures were, especially European, were satisfied. What do they want to hear? What do they want to do? Even with Barry Gordy having to, I'm glad they touched on how he had Diana Ross and all of his groups dressed to the nines to compete with the white artists. And it's just kind of like, why do you have to do all of these things? But the biggest thing that I learned, and I'm be done. Look, I'm wrapping it up. The biggest thing that I learned from this book was about the sugar. I really didn't realize sugar was that big of a thing from the sugar cane here in the United States and how we ship so much to Europe. I just was very ignorant in that. I knew about it, but I didn't know about it. And I was just so focused on cotton and, you know, the other things, the other agriculture side of it. But that whole chapter just blew me away about how important sugar was. So, and we've not only did slaves fund the United States and build the United States, we built other countries as well. So I think that kind of, it was stirring stuff up in me. I was getting a little angry, so I had to keep stopping. But it was good. It was very good. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed those parts.
Yeah, yeah. It was just so much.
It was.
There was a lot, but I learned so much, and that's why I think this book is so relevant. So I kind of had my little moment with Isaiah. Like I said, I really the Elmore Boiling story was very, and we've seen it before. And like I said, just kind of seeing the continuation, and you know, there's probably hundreds of stories that never even make it to the mainstream of similar incidents. But just again, looking at how that one life-altering, you know, action of, you know, a father losing his life behind his business practices, how that had a long-term effect on his family. It was just, yeah, that was just a lot for me. So you guys kind of touched on it, Laria, even with the church. I found it very interesting. So in that chapter, we also talked about the Charleston AME Church. And
yeah,
it was kind of chilling for me. I had a moment because, so they talk about and discuss how you had a slave revolt, the Denmark Vesey revolt in Charleston. And it was an unsuccessful revolt, but again, it was a movement for the black enslaved or people at that time to try to get away. And as a result of that failed attempt, the people of Charleston burned down the Charleston AME Church.
Wow.
Then you fast forward to 2015, Dylan Roof goes into the Charleston AME Church and kills members
Mhm.
there doing a Bible study.
Right.
Like it was chilling to me to see how just the history of this one church, like how much they've gone through. And again, this is just one small incident that we're talking about amongst thousands or hundreds of thousands within this country. But just to see the continuation of violence, even within the church, that was just woo, like that was hard to even hear to think about
Mhm.
the church being burned, rebuilt, and then seeing still acts of violence taken out against the church, even in 2015 by Dylan Roof.
Mhm.
Um, it's a lot of information. Another story that really stood out to me is in chapter 18, which is justice, and it talks about Kelly House suing the United States government. So a black
Oh yeah,
woman
yeah,
deciding to sue the
yeah.
U.S. government
Hmm.
for a pension plan
Hmm.
for formerly enslaved people based on the fact that there's been taxes paid on cotton that was picked. And so
Hmm.
she felt that the enslaved people after kind of the Reconstruction period
Hmm.
and them being free from slavery, that they deserved a pension based on the taxes that have been generated by their free labor. And of course, the federal government didn't want to hear or have any parts of that, so they denied her lawsuit against them. And it was really, we have these talks about reparation. I think that was kind of one of the early stories, if even, and it made so much sense because she had documented information about the taxes being paid based on the cotton industry at that time. Like I said, the government, they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to have any parts of it, and
Hmm.
actually turned around and sued her for mail fraud, for federal mail fraud, and put her in jail for a year. So uh, just so much information, a lot of things that are being unpacked in this book. Like I said, I love history. So if you guys just want to have a better understanding of history within this country, like I said, all these different chapters just cover so much. Like I said, music, the church, politics, justice, there's so many different things. Even, we talk about, uh, slaves being freed and emancipation, but even the topic of, there was a movement of sending formerly enslaved people back to Africa, like this whole movement of like sending people to Liberia. I mean, that's
Mhm.
covered in this book. So just a lot of information that people may not even be aware of within this country because, again, there's just so much was happening during this time period. And just, I don't know, the book just did a great job of just kind of covering so many different topics that I think we can all relate to. So,
Hmm.
all right, I said a lot too. So, coming to Kim next. Did you have
Chris
a
and Isaiah, boy, y'all getting it today, boy.
yeah? So, Kim, did you have a favorite topic, chapter, story? You kind of touched on the church aspect in your documentary, but it really resonated with you as you were reading this book by Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones, The 1619 Project.
For me, I actually did like the chapter on inheritance, but the chapter that I liked the most or resonated with me the most was the chapter on medicine.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just because
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
now it's a topic about how African American women being pregnant are more likely to die, and like how we're just so like the disparity between us and other races is like really large. But if you look at the history, you can see why. So it's like looking at the medical history of African Americans and going all the way back to slavery, how white, and this was like in medical journals published, like how they were going out their way to prove like we had smaller brains and we didn't feel as much pain in order to justify us being slaves. And it was just crazy to see how like the doctor was like bragging like, oh, I amputate slaves legs without putting them out or giving them medicine. And that's crazy, like getting your leg amputated without anesthesia, and how that was common for people to get operated on that were black without anesthesia, because the medical community was like, oh, they can handle it, they can deal with the pain. That's just so crazy to me. And how that today still, like, there is that implicit bias. A lot of doctors talk
Mhm.
about it now, especially on social media, how they'll somebody black will come in and say they're in pain, and they're more likely to ignore them or not give them medication, just based off the history of what's happened here and how it's affecting even medicine today. So I thought that was very interesting, and it's it's just kind of sad, but that's just the history here in America. It's not pretty, but I'm glad it's being brought up and brought to the forefront now, so people can be aware of it and make changes to fix it. But I just thought it was crazy, especially doing experiments, and like how even like a lot of medical advancements people made were because they were experimenting on Black people. So it's crazy. So
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good. And good point. I mean, like I said, even now we're seeing the impact of those things. So we all know about the Tuskegee experiment and things that were going on with that. But like you mentioned, uh, there are medical journals and studies that show that Black people have thicker skin, or Black people have a higher tolerance of pain, or Black people don't need as much sleep. Like all these things were documented to justify the treatment that we were receiving during this time period. And I think that's the biggest part of this book, that it shows how some of the foundational notions or even the fallacies of what were known to be true at that time, how they have been perpetuated throughout history, throughout time, and how the residue is still there and has impact and influence today. So it's just crazy. And I'm still a huge proponent about, if you don't know your history, um, it's hard to move forward and not repeat those same issues. And I think it's appalling that we are in a state now where they're trying to ban certain topics from being discussed, or banning books, or trying to remove certain information because they don't want to really have a discussion or to even to talk about these things. So now you guys all bring up good points. Yeah, great book. Like I said, if you're not a reader, look, at nothing else, check out the Hulu series. I mean, it's but yeah, great book, great selection for this month, the 1619 Project by Miss Nikole Hannah-Jones. Really appreciate the body of work she's presented. It's definitely a collaborative effort. She did a lot of research, a lot of work with others to bring this to, like I said, starting out in the New York Times Magazine, to a book, and now even a series on Hulu. So definitely check her out. And again, if you guys haven't read it already, pick it up. A lot of good information, a lot of pertinent and relevant things about the history of this country. All right, so let's pivot a little bit. We four friends in the book, we read books. We also like to talk about, current events, relevant topics that may be going on today as well. And so, look, if y'all watch the news at all, I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with what's going on in Tennessee right now. The Tennessee lawmakers have voted to expel two state representatives. So Representative Justin Pearson and Justin Jones were expelled from the state legislature for their protests on some gun safety and gun violence. So again, we just had another mass shooting. And it's crazy that even here within our podcast, we've had the discussion several times. We've talked about different events, tragedies, and loss of life behind these mass shootings. And so, yet once again, we've experienced one in Tennessee, and these two representatives decide to take action. And so they kind of lead a protest, and as a result of that, they were expelled. So kind of wanted to have a discussion with you guys, kind of wanted to get you guys' thoughts and opinion. What do you think about this? The fact they've actually been expelled from an elected position. I mean, they've been elected and voted into these positions. Of course, now, they've been reinstated, but the fact that they actually were removed from a position that the people voted them to be in, and they've been removed. What are you guys' thoughts, concerns, even in, I guess, just opinions about this? this action or injustice has taken place within the Tennessee legislature. So, coming to who want to talk on this?
Isaiah.
Yeah, look,
I got you.
we're gonna let my brother dig into it. Let him
Okay.
get into this one then. Go ahead.
Okay, Representative Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, the two black men who actually were expelled from the House of Tennessee representatives. But it was actually three people who actually brought up this notion, but only two got suspended. That's very interesting. It's morally insane that in Tennessee they can pass laws to ban books, ban conversation about racism and bias in schools, ban drag shows, and even ban black legislators that disagree with them. But we can't ban and militarize guns from terrorizing our community. America will be forced to have their people have children, but will not lift a finger to support these victims in gun violence. These are the same politicians restricting our civil rights and the ones that will unfair their access to guns despite the repeated shootings. And these tragedies need to actually stop. How many lives have become collateral damage due to these unchecked gun controls? Politicians have decided that these deaths are the price that they are willing to pay to maintain this political power. And it's very interesting to be clear. Tennessee House Speaker Cameron Sexton thought it would be fun to expel Justin Jones and Justin Pearson for racist purposes. And in doing so, it will discover that this House of Representative Speaker has committed voter fraud and ran a reimbursement scam that has this fake travel expenses. Now he's the one who actually needs to be expelled and arrested.
That's good. Like, boy, you gonna roll today, man. Like we can,
Get it,
we can,
Isaiah.
we can like mini rants and mini rants. Look, I don't even know what to expect when the real rant comes. Like you just building up.
That's good.
Yeah. So Kim, what are your thoughts? And Isaiah brings up a good point. So there were actually three members that were actually a part of this movement, but only two were expelled. So what are your thoughts about this whole? What are your thoughts about this whole? Just how this whole thing played out.
Well, as a former Nashvilleian,
Okay.
I used to live in Nashville, but anyway,
Nashvilleian.
Nashvilleian. I think for me, of course, the whole thing. I think for me, the major thing I took away from it, or I just disagreed with, was them actually being voted out, because that in essence is disfranchising the people that voted them in to represent them. And I just think that's a slippery slope. Now, I know I saw him on the Breakfast Club. I believe it was Pearson on the Breakfast Club. He's talking about how he got expelled and how they were saying because he had the bullhorn, and he was saying like, well, they were ignoring me, weren't taking my money. Like, it was a whole, whole thing behind it. But I think at the end of the day, setting that kind of precedent is a slippery slope, because what's to stop people from banding together and voting people out in the future just because they don't agree with something for their political party? So I just think that's the part of it that was kind of alarming to me. I was just like, because what's good for one, the goose is good for the gander. Then next thing you know, another thing comes up. Now they're voting people out, and I just felt like it was a slippery slope. So I don't think it should have ever happened. I think it didn't need to go that far. But for me, the major takeaway, or the major issue I had with it was, I think it was more going against what our democracy represents and like for the people. So that was my whole takeaway from it, or issue with it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you bring up a good point. This does set a precedent, and we kind of know how our political and legal system works, where a lot of times things are often based on precedents. And so, we often talk about voting and the importance of that. And so to have elected officials to now be removed based off of, and it really comes down to the majority of who's in the, who's in charge and who has the power as a majority political party, and how your vote or what the people want can really be removed. So, they were removed for violating the House decorum rule, and I get that. I understand there's rules about these things, but considering the stance that was being taken, this is a result of loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're talking about children lives are being lost at this point. So at some point, it can't be politics as usual. Like something has to change. And I think this was the stance that may have been necessary to really to get a wake up call for people. And I also think it did highlight some of the injustices and some racial undertones as well. Like I said, you had two black men that were expelled, and the white woman was allowed to remain based on the notion that she wasn't as involved or as engaged in this outcry, but yet she was still a part of it. And even when they were restored, man, just seeing like the other you know members sitting there, it's almost like they just had a look of distaste on their face when the representatives were restored back. It's just it's evil, man. Like I don't know. It's like and it should be about the people. It should be about trying to have a safe environment for these state legislators. But we're so politically motivated now that like I think they lost sight of what they're really there for,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the sad part. So to Kim's point, I hope this doesn't set a precedent for people to just be voted out for any reason at all. Like I said, I understand there needs to be rules. I understand certain things have to be set in place, but yeah, I think this was overreach, and I think that I hope that this doesn't start or snowball into something that's much larger and just gets uglier. So, all right, Laria, any thoughts, comments, or even perspective about what has happened in Tennessee with the two representatives being expelled? Again, they've been restored now, but just the fact or the process that they've gone through or had to go through for a position that they were actually elected to be in the first place.
Well, I believe, we always talk about the forefathers of America and how they wanted things to be. This was a classic case of what was written in the Constitution and what's supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be disagreements. You're supposed to have people who don't agree with you, and it's very disheartening. And it's a signal for the minority to stop voting because your voice will not be heard. That's
Mm.
the undertone in it to me. When we just had a whole full overthrow of the government. So don't get me started on that. It's like
Wow.
ain't nobody get arrested for that. These
Who
people were
ranting?
able to come in. Right, we
Who
were.
ranting?
These people were able to go into I mean, police officers killed, people got injuries for life. And you mean to tell me all these senators, all these people were in there, didn't nobody had a clue what was going on? Come on now. But we're gonna overthrow these two people for trying to get all children, not just black children, not just
Mm-hmm.
white children, everybody
Mm-hmm.
safe within the school system. It's just stupid. I mean, it's dumb. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my rant.
Like the rant.
It's dumb.
Okay.
It's stupid. But anyway.
Okay. Laria coming in with her little mini rant. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I don't like it.
All right. So, look, y'all know what time it is. Our favorite segment of the show, which we entitled The Rant. So, 60 seconds uninterrupted, coming from none other than my brother, Mr. Isaiah Tooks. Look, we never know what we getting. He's speaking from the heart. We don't contest it. We don't debate it. He just speaks whatever's on his mind. So, my brother, the floor is yours. 60 seconds starting now. Go.
Justice Clarence Thomas is yet again in hot water because he's knowingly failed to report decades worth of lavish trips, favors, donations, and real estate purchases that he's gotten from Republican billionaire mega donor Harlan Crow. Harlan Crow has bribed him for decades with private plane travel and purchased properties for Thomas and his relatives, meaning that the cash flowed directly from him to Thomas, and Thomas never reported it. You have to wonder, what would a man do that you will buy his mom a house, spend tens of thousands of dollars in upgrades, and even buy the land surrounding it so the neighbors had to do nothing but move? Do you think that's an amazing political friend who doesn't want any favors? Clarence Thomas is not unfairly singled out because he's black. He's been called out because he's offered the majority opinion on overturning Roe v. Wade, same-sex marriages, contraceptives, and affirmative action cases, all while every action that he has ever done has been dripped in corruption. Just imagine if we had listened to Anita Hill. History lesson. Clarence Thomas replaced the late great Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. While Justice Marshall stood for the betterment, empowerment, and advancement of black folk, his replacement does not. And that's that on that.
Woo,
That was
that's
good.
good, man. And I think it shows the importance of our elected officials. Of course, we don't vote for judges, but we do vote for our congressmen and women, and they are the ones who, help in the process of getting, justices sworn in along with the president. So it's just a lot, man. It makes you question
Mhm.
a lot of the foundational things of our
Mhm.
country, but we just need to be aware and continue to hold them accountable when we can. So good rant, my brother. Good rant. All right. So with that being said, we just wrapped up this book, 1619 Project by Nikole Hannah-Jones. Had our little discussion and conversation about some relevant topics of today. My boy just killed this rant. And so each month we want you guys to read along with us. So Isaiah, tell them about the book we have coming up for next month.
Hey guys, before you leave, please join us in our next episode as we read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. You don't want to miss it. Lareal, please let the viewers know when they can tune in.
You can tune in every third Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you with us.
And if you're watching this video on YouTube, which I'm sure you are, make sure to like this and subscribe to our channel. You can also listen to us on the various platforms for podcasting and on social media. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram.
Exactly. Guys, we just thank you for your support, for continuing to just
Thank you.
join in with us as we review these books and have our discussions each month. And as always, let's continue to read, let's learn, let's grow, let's have a discussion right here on Four Friends in a Book. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.